3 years, 6 months, 42 months worth of a break. Okay, by the time October comes around,
Right.
you're going to have 3.5 years of having student loans but not having to pay student loans.
Right.
And we wonder why our inflation is so rampant out there, because all of this extra money that's not going to pay student loans is going into the economy. And I've said all along, for the past however long, fix the immigration thing, stop screwing around, and have people start paying on their student loans.
Right. Well, yeah, absolutely. Because if people aren't having to pay on student loans, they've got extra income, right, which is causing prices to increase, right? So I think it will help with inflation, which Biden really needs.
Yep.
And
so does everybody that's listening really needs that.
Right. We all need a reduction in inflation.
Yep.
And so the Supreme Court decision was a really interesting one. It was about 77 pages, written by Justice Roberts. And Justice Roberts will often side with the more kind of liberal-leaning justices. And I was maybe even expecting a 5-4 decision, but 6-3 means, and the way the ruling was worded was a really very forceful slap down of the Biden administration on this student loan forgiveness. Basically, they said that the attempt to rewrite the law from top to bottom in order to give this student loan forgiveness was a power grab, and that the power of the purse does rest with Congress.
Yep.
And that this was completely unconstitutional, just kind of no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so now the Biden administration is saying that they're going to continue to fight for student loan forgiveness, but now they're going to, instead of tying it to the HEROES Act, which was really a far-fetched idea kind of in the first place, which almost makes me think that they knew that it was going to be struck down by the Supreme Court. And in the meantime, people didn't have to make payments on student loans. It was a good campaign issue. It does kind of get the base, riled up.
Yep.
And in the meantime, they didn't have to make payments, and then it was probably going to be struck down. Well, now they can go back and try under the Higher Education Act to try and have student loan forgiveness. And with the idea that this is going to continue, this idea is going to continue through the next election. So they get to keep this as an election issue. And look, it's kind of a win-win. If it doesn't work, then they get to contrast themselves with the Republicans. If it does work, great, then there's student loan forgiveness.
Sure.
But the idea that it's going to work is crazy, because anything that costs hundreds of billions of dollars, you need authority
approval
from Congress, right?
All right, so now we have party's over. It was supposed to be September 1st, but so of course nothing could start on time, and they kicked it back to October 1st.
Right.
So we're within 90 days of the first student loan payments hitting the beaches.
Right.
Okay. What is happening in your office since the Supreme Court decision came down 6-3, slapping this down?
Well, so we're just getting a ton of phone calls. Basically, how does this affect me? How does this affect my student loans? What's the plan now? And there's a lot of panic because servicers, again, are sending out these letters, putting people in the wrong payment plan with very high monthly payments of over $1,000 a month. But I just want people to know not to panic. Don't worry about those letters. You do have to make a plan. You do need to take some affirmative steps. You don't want to go into default on your student loans, but there are great options already under the statute. There's actually going to be extra forbearance available in addition to the 36 months that you get under the statute. So probably 48 months of forbearance, potentially interest
if you
does
qualify,
accrue.
right?
If you qualify, but
Okay.
most people will. The question is whether or not strategically it makes sense to use forbearance, because that means your loans are growing and you're not making any progress on them. But there's, generally speaking, for most people, ways to go about forgiveness. And now there's another executive order from the Biden administration, which is called the IDR account adjustment. And what that does is it essentially gives you credit towards forgiveness that you normally wouldn't have. So it cuts your payment term in half, and it cuts your monthly payments in half. So if your payment was $500 a month, your payment would now be about $250 a month. But you do have to enroll in it, and there's some paperwork and a process involved, basically.
What if you were under the forgiveness program because you were a teacher, you work for a non-for-profit, you work for government, all the different lists of agencies that qualified for the student loan forgiveness.
Right.
And you went and you were enrolled in that prior to COVID,
Mm-hmm.
okay, prior to March of 2020. And now we've got 42 months. Do those 42 months of non-payment count towards the 10 years, or was that put on hold, and now the 42 months doesn't count for the 10 years worth of forgiveness?
Those 42 months do count towards that public service loan forgiveness as long as you were employed full-time in the public sector during that time.
Wow.
So it doesn't matter if you weren't making payments, if your payments were zero, if you were doing the COVID forbearance thing, that's all fine. All that time will count and be under your belt towards that magic 120 that you need.
As long as you were enrolled in that prior to COVID.
Yes. Or even if you got enrolled maybe after COVID, that time will count.
No way.
Yep.
That's huge for our listeners.
It's huge. The other thing that people don't know is, remember that PSLF waiver?
No.
All right. Well, it expired in October of 2022, and we were submitting hundreds and thousands of applications getting people enrolled in the PSLF waiver program, which was another Biden administration executive order giving people credit retroactively for previous years of employment in the public sector. This other executive order, has extended that now through December. So if you missed out on that, because we actually got millions of dollars of loans forgiven for even WGN listeners. Actually, quite a few WGN listeners had hundreds of thousands of dollars of loans forgiven just under that executive order. So I think the Biden administration is pretty smart here in that they're saying, kind of, look over here, we're going to do this forgiveness program. And nobody's looking at these other executive orders that are giving people billions of dollars of loan forgiveness.